Go right into conduct of business. We're going to receive an oral report on the 4th of July fireworks activities.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, City Council members. The number of fireworks-related calls for service received on July 4th, 2015 decreased by just over 7% from the previous year for a total of 104 calls. However, fireworks-related calls for service during the 8-day reporting period rose by just over 4% to 144 total calls. The largest increase was experienced on July 3rd, as 14 related calls were received compared to 5 from the previous year. The department anticipated a higher number of calls for service on the 4th of July because it fell on a Saturday this year. Additionally, the ongoing drought conditions were believed to have caused a heightened awareness that may have resulted in a much larger call volume. Fortunately, a significant increase was not realized. The peak activity began on July 4th at approximately 9 p.m. and tapered off just prior to midnight. There were 96 dispatch calls or calls initiated by officers in the field related to firework use between 6 p.m. and midnight on the 4th. The use of illegal fireworks was often intermingled with the use of safe and sane fireworks, making it difficult for officers to detect violations. Complaints of illegal fireworks were received citywide, with many complaints actually involving the use of legal, safe, and sane fireworks. In an effort to educate and raise awareness, staff worked with San Bruno Cable to provide public service announcements aired on the cable channel. A mailer with a message from the fire and police chiefs was disseminated via mail by the city prior to the July 4th holiday. Police and fire personnel met with fireworks vendors and reviewed the rules and regulations for the sale of safe and sane fireworks. In the days leading to the July 4th holiday, police department personnel visited locations where problems had arisen in previous years. Officers spoke with residents about the use of illegal fireworks, including enforcement efforts, penalties for the possession and use, and the danger these items pose to the community. Additionally, officers warned the residents about excessive consumption of alcohol, the impact large and unruly parties have on the community, and pedestrian safety, including children in the street. Prior to this holiday, the city and police department received emails from residents concerned about the behavior of their neighbors during previous years. Officers contacted each of these individuals personally to review their concerns and to explain the city's approach for this year's holiday. On July 3rd, San Bruno police detectives identified individuals attempting to sell illegal fireworks online. Police personnel, posing as illegal fireworks purchasers, conducted an undercover operation. During this operation, an individual arrived in San Bruno to sell an undercover officer illegal fireworks. The subject was arrested, and a subsequent search of their residence outside of the city resulted in the seizure of in excess of 50 pounds of illegal fireworks. The police department deployed officers to conduct illegal fireworks enforcements one day prior to the 4th and one day following the holiday. Officers patrolled for illegal fireworks and violations of safe and sane use, paying particular attention to open space areas. The officers also assisted with the education campaign and made contact in those neighborhoods where the department had previously received large numbers of complaints. These officers were assigned during peak times of activity, which was 6:30 p.m. to midnight. All available personnel were brought to work the 4th of July. In addition to normal patrol beats, firework enforcement teams were organized and assigned to geographic locations from 6 p.m. on July 4th to 2 a.m. on the 5th. In all, 42 sworn and 15 non-sworn personnel worked this detail. When officers were able to observe an individual using illegal fireworks, officers made use of the city ordinance sections and issued administrative citations that carry a $1,000 fine per violation. Officers issued a total of 11 administrative citations for the use and or possession of dangerous fireworks. 9 citations were issued on the 4th of July itself, and 2 citations were issued on July 3rd. Of the 11 individuals that were issued administrative citations, 2 were San Bruno residents. Approximately 86 pounds of illegal fireworks were seized, and this includes the approximately 72 pounds seized on July 3rd as a result of the undercover operation, leaving about 14 pounds seized on July 4th. There were 3 small fire-related events on the 4th of July addressed by police personnel that I'll let Chief Downing speak to shortly. There were no reports of gunshots, no alcohol-related incidents or arrests, or pedestrian safety issues. When contacting large groups celebrating the holiday, officers encountered cooperation. Although you are very aware, I believe that it's important to note that the preparation and response to this holiday is a collaborative effort that requires a great deal of planning. A preliminary cost estimate for this year's education and enforcement program citywide, including all participating departments, is between $65,000 and $69,000. The calculated costs only include what is done above and beyond the normal course of business to prepare for the 4th of July holiday. I'd like to acknowledge the work of the Police Department command staff for developing a thorough and comprehensive operations plan, as well as all of the officers, dispatchers, community service officers, and clerks who spent this holiday away from their families in an effort to provide for the safety of our city. Additionally, I'd like to recognize the Community Services Department, who assigned 4 staff members to monitor activity at the parks throughout the city. I'd also like to extend my appreciation to the Public Services Department, whose staff picked up 3 truckloads or 6 cubic yards of trash the following day. Finally, I'd like to thank the Fire Department, who worked hand in hand with the Police Department personnel to provide for a safe evening. This concludes my presentation. I'd like to turn it over to Chief Downing for the fire prevention portion, after which I'd be happy to answer any questions. Chief?
After that very in-depth report, mine will be a little quicker. Starting with the efforts prior to the 4th of July, as Chief Barberini mentioned, the public education outreach, focus articles, cable television, the mailer that went out, and educational material that went out to the school. I think the citizens really listened and took some extra precautions, except for the ones that were using illegal fireworks. And due to the drought awareness campaign that we sent a lot of educational material out. So fire-wise, it was a pretty quiet 4th of July. Again, we met with the regulatory meeting with all the vendors and organizations selling fireworks. There were daily inspections of the 18 fire booths by the Fire Marshal, Jim Allen, and the engine companies. We again had extra staffing on the 4th of July. We staffed an additional engine company dedicated just to San Bruno. We also had an additional battalion chief on duty, along with the fire marshal and myself. They did some patrolling before dark and throughout the day before the fireworks started. All in all, there were 12 calls for service on the 4th of July, which included 5 medical calls, a vehicle accident, 2 alarm soundings, and an electrical odor investigation. The 3 fireworks-related calls were a small grass fire located at Whitman and Shelter Creek. That was about a 30 by 30 area that was charred, and it had a tie to illegal firework use. Chief Barberini stated that the person that did start that fire or was responsible was cited. There were 2 other small trash fires, one at Lamita Park School and one at the corner of Garden and Mastic. A total, as Chief Barberini mentioned, a total of 86 pounds of illegal fireworks were confiscated and were packaged for disposal later in the month. That concludes my report. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer any.
Anything for the chiefs? Let me just ask a quick question. So we charge a fee to all of the booth people. Maybe this is to Carol or to Angie, I'm not sure. But overall, what is that charge for our cost to clean up and monitor and maintain extra troops?
When the groups are charged, they're charged based on their sales, and the charges they receive are for our police, our fire, and our public work expenses. We do not make any money on it. We just recoup the cost that we've expended to cover the event.
So we look at the event afterwards, and then how is that?
I send a letter to each of the people who have a booth, and then I attach a state Board of Equalization form for them to fill out to report how much that they actually made. They send it back to us, and then finance allocates, they add up all the like this year there were 16 vendors, so they add up all the 16 vendors' costs and then divide it by 16. They add up all the police, fire, public works costs divided by 16.
So there's no annual flat type of fee. It's not that we have
No annual
carryovers
fee.
or anything like that.
The vendors, TNT and Phantom, each provide $750 for each of the booths. They give that to them up front, but then they take it out from them when when it's done. They take it out from their profit.
So the bottom line is the cost to monitor and to have the extra troops on board and everything for that particular evening is borne by the people that sell the fireworks.
Exactly.
Okay, so they get charged exactly what it costs?
Exactly what it costs.
Okay, so there's no carryover to next year or
Never.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Mayor, if I could make a slight clarification, there is a nuance to the information that the city clerk just provided you. The calculation of or the allocation of the costs, and I'll just repeat that 100% of the city's costs for managing, educating, monitoring, and enforcing during the 4th of July holiday period is recovered from the selling groups. The clarification is that each of the groups report their sales, and then they each pay a proportionate share of the city's costs based on the same proportion that they represented out of the total sales of all of the groups. So if Pee Wee Baseball, for example, sold an amount that represented 10% of the total sales of all 16 groups, if their share of the gross receipts was 10%, they would pay 10% of the costs associated with the city's services.
So it's a pro rata share based
It's a
on
pro
their
rata
sales.
share based
Right,
on,
okay.
so those who make more, cover more cost.
Okay, all right, thank you. Anyone else? Ken?
I have a question for Chief Barberini. Every year, there seems to be a sense of frustration from a few residents, and even though I wasn't in the area, I was receiving emails, particularly two of residents who were complaining about illegal use of fireworks. Now, in the follow-up, I understand that the department responded to these people, but if you can just give us an idea as to when a call comes in, obviously it's a resident who's complaining that, using terms like it's a war zone and we've got, there's no enforcement here, there's illegal fireworks flying over our houses and everything. How do you respond, and what is the, for lack of a better term, the success rate in being able to, catch these violators?
Sure.
And if I could add, every call that comes into the department is answered or responded to, in some, even though you may not catch the individual or individuals that they're complaining about.
Yes, what makes San Bruno, the San Bruno's response unique to the 4th of July compared to other cities is we do respond to every call that's received, every fireworks-related call, which is not a common practice amongst other local law enforcement agencies. So we do respond to every call. Our citation, the amount of citations we wrote this year is slightly higher than it's been in previous years, so the enforcement efforts were there. The challenge that we face from a law enforcement perspective is we're not going to go into people's backyards. We're not going to enter into people's homes to search for fireworks. There are some legal issues with that, as well as it just not being the right thing to do. The folks that were cited and that were caught were basically standing on the street corner lighting these illegal fireworks off, and that's typically how we combat this issue and enforce it. The challenge we do have is if you are in the privacy of your backyard and you're doing this, it's still not a legal thing to do, but it doesn't allow us to go into your yard and take enforcement action. So that's one of the challenges. It's one of the struggles that we face. A lot of the other, or not a lot, but a common theme that we noticed this year was there were a great deal of complaints regarding safe and sane fireworks, for people who were pretty much behaving within the boundaries of the statute. They just happened to be large groups congregated in a specific area, and there are some legal fireworks that make some noise, the Piccolo Pete types things that whistle, which I understand do have an impact on pets and neighbors and residents. So sometimes we're responding to calls where there's really, statutorily, there's really nothing we can do to take enforcement action other than to get out and talk to the folks and make sure that they understand what the rules are. But those are the two challenges we face. One is, if the illegal behavior is taking place in a backyard, it's not something we can address legally. And the other is a misunderstanding of the statute or the ordinance sometimes in responding to what is actually safe and sane fireworks being let off in accordance with the statute.
Yeah, Rico.
A couple things. So first, to both departments and Public Works and Community Services, thank you for your efforts. As normal, Rico went and stopped by the briefing in the fire department and then did actually a short ride along with the new chief. Didn't want him to feel neglected since Neil had gotten all those rides. But one thing that it did is not only to see and hear, and we went around, mostly around a lot of the community. One thing that was considered when we actually brought it up in the car was currently the fireworks stopped being sold at 9 o'clock, if I'm correct, on 4th of July. A thought is, as the chief indicated, 9 o'clock starts a lot of the activity because it gets dark. I'm just wondering for next year or for some conversation is maybe having that stopped earlier, so maybe 8 or 7. My rationale behind that is it's still light outside. By 9 o'clock, you've got our heaviest peak time. You've got the officers out there, and I'm wondering, do we want them to get called to a booth because they stopped selling to somebody, or somebody's loitering, or somebody feels unsafe, packing up the fireworks in the container and getting to their car who've been a volunteer? So I'm wondering, for consideration for next time, whether we move that to an earlier shut-off time, maybe a 7 o'clock, so people can get cleaned up, get out, and get done during the daylight, so when the heavy time and peak, people are off the roads, and the officers and fire department can concentrate on the calls that we receive. The second thing is, I know this is tradition to have an oral report. I went back the last couple years, was looking for a staff report. It's all been oral, and I understand that. I would like to see going forward that there actually be a staff report with some of these facts and figures. What I was having to do was find it on the agenda, go back into the video, and then compare it, just to see how we were this year versus last year. So we have some type of record, I think, would be helpful for those folks that want to see it in the future or currently. I think what you give is great information, and I know you put it out pretty darn quick after the 4th, so that would be helpful.
If I could just comment on the second item first, and then the city attorney has a comment on your first item. I actually made the same note earlier this evening. The reason that we have gotten into the habit, I guess it is, of doing the oral report is that sometimes the 4th of July falls very close to the scheduled city council meeting date. And when that happens, it's very difficult for staff to produce a written report timely for the agenda packet. But we can certainly, irregardless of that, we can certainly produce a written report, and we will certainly agenda it as a written report in any subsequent year when we can, and produce a written report regardless. A very good idea.
And so, through the chair, if I may, on the first point, the hours of operation are in the ordinance. My mic was on, actually. Yes, it is.
Start all over.
The hours of operation are in the ordinance.
Which means they were part of the voter approval and can't be changed by the city council.
And I was unaware of that. I was just trying to look at the logistics and the deployment of personnel and where it would be best and safest. So I was unaware that that is
Okay. Anyone
a
else?
law.
I attempted to get the final figures of the sales, which we do get, but TNT wasn't able to provide those to me yet. I got them from Phantom, which represented 3 of the groups, but the other groups, I didn't get that. And that's something that would be good in a report to go forward.
Good. Great. Thank you.